Freeze. Welcome to You'll Probably Agree. Today I have Jeff York from the Establishing Shot on, and we are talking because the new Naked Gun is out today. Usually I don't like cover movies that come out the same day, but this was kind of a cool exception because the Naked Gun is one of my favorite comedies of all time. And when they did the follow up, I was nervous, but I'll give you my thoughts on the follow up when we do it. But first, I think we will talk about the first Naked Gun. The real title is The Naked Gun from the Files of Police Squad that came out in 1988, which was basically it was what Police Squad, the show, wanted to be, which was going to be the movie. But before I got into all that, Jeff, could you give me your thoughts on The Naked Gun and maybe a synopsis on it? The 1988 film, of course.
Sure. I mean, a little bit of context. And I said to Mike before the show, folks, that, I'm sort of in that maybe envious position, though some would say maybe not so envious, that I'm old enough to know those shows when they were first out. The big one where you kind of have to start in some respects is with Airplane in 1980. I mean, yes, Mel Brooks did parodies of specific genres and things like that in films, whether it was Silent Movie or Young Frankenstein, and sort of taking the piss out of some of those things that we all knew very well in the tropes of those types of films. But the real granddaddy of them all, as far as this kind of spoof that's kind of a gag a minute, both puns, visual puns, background bits, satirizing of tropes of genre, was Airplane in 1980, which was a spoof of all the sort of disaster movies from the 70s, starting with really Airport in 1970. And that begat the Poseidon Adventure and the Swarm and all other kinds of things like Earthquake and stuff like that. And they did a very funny parody of it in 1980 that was, like I said, a lot of jokes all coming at you fast and furious, some about the genre, some about plays on words like, surely there must be something we can do here, doctor. Yes, there is. Just don't call me Shirley. That kind of thing, where it's funny wordplay. I think the funniest thing about it is in many respects, and this was very true when they did the Police Squad television series a couple of years later in 82, is they played it very, very straight. Now, there were some things and moments of it, there were big gags and lots of, slapsticky kind of things. But by and large, the cast actors in it played their parts almost the same way they would have in a regular dramatic movie of the same sort of material. Famously, Robert Stack said when they were shooting Airplane, "Do you want me to make this funny?" And the creators of the show, of the movie, the Zuckers and Abrams, said, "No, what's funny about it is you're doing it exactly like you've done in all those dramatic episodes of television movies that you've been in for 30, 40 years. And you're just saying these sort of silly, nonsensical things, or within the context of this lunacy that makes it funny. But you don't act like you're in a comedy. You act like you're in those dramas." And the same thing with Leslie Nielsen, who did it very deadpan, almost as sort of stiff as he did all of his sort of macho leading men or supporting leading men roles in television for, again, 30, 40 years before that, as well as Lloyd Bridges and Peter Graves. These were not actors known for great acting range. I don't think anybody put them up there with the Oliviers and the Brandos of the world, but they were good, solid actors, presences on television for decades, and they played these kind of stoic male roles. And that's what made it so funny, is they played the exact characters in the 80s movie Airplane, the 80 movie Airplane. And then Leslie Nielsen, who was so good in that, was hired to do the same thing in Police Squad. And that was a very, very sort of deadpan approach to it all. When the time they got to The Naked Gun, 88, with a bigger budget, and people were on to sort of these gags and how they did them, there were a couple of sequels. Airplane had already had a sequel. They decided to go for, I think, a little bit more of a range of comedy, Mike, if I dare say. You said it very well. In fact, why don't you say what you thought it was kind of a combination of, because it's a great quote, I think.
Oh, sure. So when I was watching The Naked Gun, and I've watched it throughout the years, like it's a staple of my childhood, and it's something that I saw on home video, and I've been watching endlessly ever since, because they're only an hour 25 minutes. You can blow right through them.
Yeah.
But The Naked Gun, it's kind of like, it's a parody on cop procedurals like Dragnet, but it's also sort of a comedy on like the old Humphrey Bogart film noir movies. And it's what was the other thing that I
with a lot
couldn't
of
think?
sort of slapstick, like the Three
Oh,
Stooges
and Three
thrown
Stooges, yeah, very vaudeville as well, yeah.
combination
So
of those three things, which I think is pretty accurate. There
yeah.
was some of that, obviously, in the previous shows that I talked about, though I think as the movies went on more, the slapstick became a little bit more a big part and parcel of it. This new one goes back a little bit more to being straighter, which I think is a right move if they're going to sort of relaunch it. But when the Naked Gun came out, it felt slightly familiar because I think people had seen Airplane and Police Squad on television, and they'd seen it probably rerun or seen on cable television. I mean, HBO was running lots of those movies back then. So they were kind of already in on the joke of what they're doing there and allowed them to go a little bit broader with some of the gags and, some of the things they were having fun with. They still did a little bit of the casting straight actors. George Kennedy was cast in it, though he did some comedies in his day, and he was often very much the comedic or sidekick in whether it's Cool Hand Luke or Airport. He played sort of the funny guy in the drama. But Ricardo Montalban was the villain. Certainly nobody thought Priscilla Presley was exactly a big ingenue. She'd been in some soaps like Dallas and some of those kind of things during the time. But they played it pretty straight, and a lot of the lines and a lot of the stuff is in that hard-boiled gumshoe narrative, like I walked in the room and she was staring at me like so many things, and then you cut to her and
Yeah.
it looks like the description that he's just said, which was in the original Bogart movies just a description.
Yeah.
But and they got a little dirtier because they could. I think the other ones were aimed at a little bit more of a PG audience, and even though I think Naked Gun, if I remember correctly, was rated PG. It wasn't for trying to be a little bit dirty. Like at one point, he looks up Priscilla Presley's skirt as she's walking up a ladder to retrieve a piece of art. And he goes, "Nice beaver," and she goes, "Oh, thank you." And then she walks down, and it's a stuffed beaver that she's holding, and it's.
Did
It's
Ernest
so
Betty's
bad.
critics share in the comments that actually they had like a popcorn bucket that was the beaver, or I don't know, that would have been a great marketing
Yeah,
scheme,
they
I
could have
think.
done some really funny things with
Yeah.
that. Certainly, a gun that has the that you drink the liquid out of for your soda,
Oh yeah.
or the big bullet that they have him riding on. But when that came out, it kind of caused a sensation, and I think by that point too, Mike, as you said, let's put it in the context of sort of comedy and where it fits. Before that, as far as satire goes, you would have a certain amount of that in any kind of variety show, like Carol Burnett or Sid Caesar's your shows back in the 50s. But the 60s really was kind of owned as far as sort of satire by a lot of stuff that Mel Brooks was starting to do in his movies and his work, as well as, of course, Mad Magazine, which I think at the beginning, Airplane and that seemed like that, because Mad Magazine always had stuff going on in the background that wasn't part of the main story thing if you missed it. And, lots of details like that throughout that were funny. And some of the same plays on words and making fun of the tropes and making fun of the movie the way they did. And then the 70s introduced everybody to Saturday Night Live, and then that became a sensation. So I think people were more primed for satire. It was not a big thing outside of those couple examples that were sort of worldwide phenomenons. But with Airplane becoming such a big hit, Airplane 2 was a big hit. It sort of opened up this whole new world of satire and different things. Even though it wasn't a big hit on television, I think it only lasted the one season and 6 episodes. People rediscovered it. I think it was on, some of the cable shows. And by the time Naked Gun came out, people were understanding of what that kind of humor was, and they'd seen enough of it, and it registered with them. And I still think it's funny because, here's Leslie Nielsen, this actor that probably most people had seen play in television in the 70s and 80s. And here he is, late in his life, I think he was 65 when this first movie was done, playing this comedic lead and very good at it. I mean, he was very good. I mean, he played it deadpan, but when he had to be physical and do some things there, that is him rolling around on top of some of the actors in it. And, that can't be easier. I love the montage where he and Priscilla Presley are falling in love, and, tells me, I'm into something good. And, they're rolling around and they clothesline somebody on the beach because everybody's seen the running the
Yeah.
water shallows there kind of scene, but they clothesline somebody, laughing and having fun together. And
They put the music video title like on the lower third of the
right,
screen.
right.
Yeah.
I think it was also, you have to understand, in 1980, it was very funny to see
Yeah.
them coming out howling at the movie they had just seen, with the camera panning up to reveal the marquee to read Platoon, a movie that I don't think had any real laughs in it.
Yeah.
But
I was thinking, like,
so
what if they were like, but it would be a newer movie, because like a newer version would be like Schindler's List or something like that.
exactly, they might have
Which
done that.
reminds me of Seinfeld. You made out
Yeah,
during
that's right.
Schindler's
I mean,
List?
and that was daring in 94 or whatever the hell they did that parody,
Yeah.
or 6 or whatever it was. So, by then I think everybody was kind of in on the idea and the jokes, and kind of got them, and they pushed it a little bit farther. But this was a humongous hit. It's only grown in its reputation since then. It spawned a couple of sequels. It created the whole industry of, the sort of self-referential films that almost were meta, parodying themselves, whether they're the Scream franchise, or the other ones that have come from there, and a lot of the stuff where they started. I mean, what was the one? The Scream was the first movie that was already kind of making fun of the horror genre, but then what was the comedy version of that? What was that called
Like
again?
Hot Shots with Charlie Sheen.
Yeah, Hot Shots. But I
They
mean,
would
then
have like Date Movie and Epic Movie, which were like bad
right. Yeah.
examples.
And then they did, I mean, then you got to the point of like 10, 15 years ago where they were literally doing entire film parodies of like 300. Like the whole movie is just a parody of that. It's like, really? That's not, I mean, that isn't even a genre. They were just doing that, or they would do some of the horror movie things, and this time they're going to do Paranormal Activity, or this time they're going after The Ring. So it became very, very specific and kind of niche almost. But it started with this one that was really sort of having fun with the whole genre of not only the detective genre, be it the Gumshoe, Bogart, or the procedurals with all the kinds of people like Leslie Nielsen, Robert Stack, often starring in those kind of shows. And then from there on, everybody sort of understood what satire was, and it became, I think, in many respects, to your earlier question, Mike, the kind of really sort of the main way that comedy went. The straight romantic comedy is rare. The straight comedy is rare. Even this kind of comedy is rare, though it's a satire. But satire started to replace comedies a lot in film. And I don't know, maybe we went so far that the only thing we could do is to start making fun of the tropes and the genres that we've all seen so much that seem to register more with folks.
Yeah. The thing I really like about Naked Guns is the fact that it's like highbrow humor and lowbrow, or not like highbrow, but like medium brow humor with lowbrow humor. And it works really well. I actually have like a brief clip that kind of like shows this, although I don't have the setup for the second punchline, but I can give you some context to it because I don't want to get a copyright strike. But I like how they mix dialogue with sort of slapstick effects. But let's take a look.
Protecting the safety of the Queen is a task that's gladly accepted by police squad. For no matter how silly the idea of having a queen might be to us, as Americans, we must be gracious and considerate hosts.
An hour and 6 minutes. Indeed, it is.
But yeah, it keeps going on.
I forgot to take the mic off as he goes to the bathroom.
Yeah, that actually happened in real life, like a few years ago. Like there was some town hall meeting, and some lady forgot that her microphone was on, and she went to the bathroom, and everyone could, like, people were like laughing in there, like in real life when it happened. But it like the thing that it does is it's taking humor that's kind of like political, where we're thinking like an oligarchy is kind of silly and all that, and he kind of puts that humor in there, but none of the humor ever seems like it's mean spirited in the films. Like even in the second one, when they're basically just constantly beating up Barbara Bush, like it's never like, oh, we hate the Bushes, it's more like, oh, this is funny that this is happening to this person. Plus they make fun of both political parties in the movie, like in the second one. Like there's a line where they say they're extinct, and he goes, oh, like the Democratic Party. And then there is a line at the end of the film where George Bush is speaking to Frank Drebin, and he says, I want you to do this job, and it's filled with the worst scum on earth. And he goes, you want me to join your cabinet? So like, I like how they kind of go after everyone like that. And the fact that, you're mixing clever dialogue. Like one of the villains, or the main villain in the first movie, is called Pap Schmear. And you have the nice beaver line. you have like the lines where Frank Drebin says, like, just think about it. The next time I could kill someone, I could be arrested or lose my job. And then of course you got the great slapstick humor where like Frank tackles the queen, and because he thinks a bunch of people are going to kill her. It's a misunderstanding, and then he slides her across the table. But what really makes these comedies work is that the Naked Gun films are a lot like British humor. It's a lot like Monty Python, where there's a little bit of setup, but there's just a lot of like rapid fire punchlines. And before you could be like, wait, that was weird, like something else happens. Like every line in this movie is almost a punchline, but it's done with little setup. And it's like the problem with a lot of comedies that I mean, maybe an American I haven't seen comedies from across the globe, to be honest, but like mostly when I see American comedies, like I had like Amazon or Paramount running while I was watching it, and it was doing autoplay after one of the Naked Guns like finished and Norbit played, and I saw immediately how we make bad comedies compared to good ones, because there's like this joke in Norbit where there's a big lady, and I think it's like Eddie Murphy just in like woman's makeup, and he's like, oh, I'm a big woman, which is kind of an outdated joke now, like the whole fat shaming thing, but whatever. Anyways, the whole joke is she jumps on top of Norbit and is gonna have her way with him, and the whole joke is, oh no, she's coming, she's gonna jump on him in the bed, and she jumped on him in the bed. Okay. There's not a lot of layers to the joke that make them work, and this film has a lot of layers where each joke is real funny, because you got the timing of the jokes, which is like really fast, but it's not too fast where it's like you can't, like I thought Naked Gun 3, the jokes were a little too often and too fast, and it didn't work as well, which would make sense since David Zucker didn't direct it. But this film, what it does is it has these jokes come at you, but they're all kind of laced with like little topical humor, but at the same time, it's not just like covering one category. Like I like Airplane, I think it's funny, but I think Airplane is just like, oh, let's just make fun of disaster movies. Where Naked Gun, it's like a mixture of cop comedies, or I'm not sorry, cop comedies, but cop dramas and film noir and all the, and like and slapstick and all this other stuff. And it's something that anyone can get, that anyone thinks is funny. And when you get older, you see that some of the jokes, like the Queen one that I pointed out, is even funnier. And the greatest thing is, it's like an Easter egg kind of movie. Like each time you watch it, you catch a new joke, or you might have, like, if you've seen it as many times as me, you know all of them by heart. But it's just something where you keep going back and it gives you something more. And that's what a good movie does.
Well, it's very rare, too, that I think a movie like these, if they're working well, manage to sort of exist and thrive on, actually, I think 3 levels. You said it was either sort of middle brow or low brow. I agree with you. Most of the humor, like the puns, they take a little bit of intellect to get them, or the play on words, like the, where it's said straight and you don't then get it, that you have to sort of have it explained to you, which sometimes is part of the vernacular of English, and they do a lot of that in the new one as well. And then of course the lowbrow are the slapstick, people fall down and go splat, and that's always funny, and everybody laughs at it in any culture, probably through any century. The highbrow part of it that I think is, again, sort of important to maintain it, and they do keep that in mind very much during this new version of the Naked Gun, is the highbrow is in the casting. The way you have actors played. If you had just comedic actors playing all this, that wouldn't work, because you'd expect it to be funny. You couldn't do this with somebody like a Kevin Hart or those kind of people. Now they are perfectly fine in other comedies and do well, and I'm not knocking them in any way, shape, or form, their talent, but they're known to be funny. When you put Robert Stack and Leslie Nielsen and now Liam Neeson in these things where they're not expected to be funny, or their careers have been built on being anything but, that's what makes this extra funny. And I think work on that highbrow level, because that's an intellectual level that is asking the viewer to assume the approach of the filmmakers and get that. Their mindfulness of casting those people to play these roles. It makes Frank Drebin funnier, because Frank Drebin is sort of this clueless, bumbling goof in the first Naked Gun, and in some degrees in this new one, and yet it's played by an actor who's playing it straight, like almost doing a drama and taking it all very serious, which makes it more funny, but it's also funny because that actor brings with him all of his film from the IMDb that we go, my God, Oscar Schindler is playing Frank Drebin. How the heck did that happen?
Yeah.
It reminds me of a quick thing, and I'll give this as an Easter egg of my own for your show or for the viewers watching it. If you've ever seen the Ricky Gervais series, Life is Short.
Oh, Life's Too, where he does
Life's Too
improv
Short.
comedy
Yeah, Life's
and he
Too
tells
Short.
him he has
Yes.
AIDS every time.
Oh, where he does
Yeah.
Life's Too Short. It's about Warwick Davis trying to be an actor, a working, struggling actor in England. He's a little person. He's very funny. He's very talented. Been around for decades now. But at one point, they have Liam Neeson coming into the offices, and he's decided he wants to be a funny actor, wants to be a stand-up and be comedic actor, do improv and create crazy characters. And they start this improv, and everything that Liam Neeson is doing, trying to play off of Ricky Gervais, is so deadly serious, and it's bringing up, to your point, AIDS and other sort of tragedies and this depression.
Yeah.
And it's so terrible that it's hilarious. And Liam Neeson does it with a completely straight face. Now, if you go on YouTube, you can find the outtakes where they're howling and you have to start over. But the fact that Liam Neeson can approach that with the same seriousness that he approached Taken or Schindler's List or anything else that he's done that are kind of those types of roles makes it all the funnier. So I think it really does work on 3 levels. And if it's really, really doing the best it can, I think it works as much on all of them equally.
Yeah, it's like when you actually buy that the character is feeling what they feel rather than like projecting to the audience, oh, hey, I'm being funny, like something like Chris Farley would have done that. He would have started screaming, be like, there's a crime going on, and immediately you'd be like, what are you doing? Which some comedies that work. But this one like works because, like you said, Leslie Nielsen was a dramatic actor before he was a comedic actor. George Kennedy, I think he was nominated for Best Actor.
Well, he's been up for many serious films, and he won the Oscar for Cool and Luke, where he's serious and funny. But actually, Mike, to build another point, I wanted to say just quickly that you said the British things, they throw stuff a lot at you, and it is this wonderful mix of verbal play as well as physical play. The other thing, though, that is very important to these movies, and I think important to the whole sort of subgenre of comedy that these spoofs have become, and it's very in tune with the British sense of comedy, is the British sense of comedy is very often people being embarrassed and shamed and being ridiculed, and they're trying to keep that face of dignity. I mean, that's what Fawlty Towers was all about. It's so brilliant because John Cleese is trying to run this little, bed and breakfast and be very serious about everything, and everything falls apart around him with him tripping over stuff and slaps. But he constantly wants to get back to, I'm dignified. This is serious. I'm being serious. This is important. And that's funny. And that's a very British thing because, of course, the British always have to keep the stiff upper lip, no matter what the crisis is. That's the same going on here, too. Frank Drebin, in both of the Naked Guns, the series with Nielsen and the new one, is just egotistical enough to want not to give away that he doesn't know what he's doing. So it overcompensates and is blithe to a lot of the stupidity that he's doing or causing around him because his ego won't let him see all the trouble that he's creating. Or if he does, like when he gets the fish, he stabs the fish with the pen.
The pen that's indestructible unless it's in water.
That's right. Throws it in the tank and just walks away. He's not going to tell the villain Ricardo Montalban that he's skewered his expensive fish with his toy because he wants to keep his dignity and he's supposed to be serious and he can't look like he's been knocked down a peg or has lost control.
Yeah, and the greatest joke above all that is that he's the police. He can kind of get away with whatever he wants. Like there's that one part where he's speaking to the mayor of the town, who's played by Tony Soprano's mother. I don't know the actress's name.
That's right, Nancy Marchand. Yes, that's right.
Yeah, and she says something like they're talking about like a shooting that happened where he killed like 6 suspects, and he's like, well, the next time I see someone getting stabbed in the middle of the street, I'm not going to stop them, I guess. And then she goes, that was a play for Shakespeare in the Park, you moron.
And see, that's also
whatever. And it's like he just constantly gets away with like killing people and blowing shit up. And it's like, it's okay because he's the police. And what are they going to do about it?
But that was also coming off of the very controversial movies in the time in the 70s with Clint Eastwood and Burt Reynolds and dare I say, Sylvester Stallone, as he got past the rocky years of playing these sort of renegade rogue private eyes or cops or whatever, and kind of getting away with, making it their own law.
Mhm.
And that became sort of, even I dare say, a template for television, with a lot of people kind of doing their own thing and breaking the law and bending a little bit to get justice in any way, shape, or form. I mean, Schwarzenegger and Stallone made a career out of it. Bruce
Oh,
Willis
yeah.
too. So they were parodying that here too, which is very funny.
That's
In
true.
fact, it's funny in the new one, they mentioned at one point where Frank Drebin says, we're the police, we can get away with anything. And they
Yeah.
said, who's supposed to police the police? The police, and it's
Yeah.
making fun of the fact. We all laugh a little bit more of that today after post Rodney King and
Yeah.
George Floyd and everything else with the police corruption that suddenly lands a little bit different than it maybe did back in '88. But here we are.
Yeah. Which has an entirely different context in this new film, which I thought was pretty funny.
Yeah.
But I mean, I like the fact that, that it kind of does add layer to Frank Drebin when you think about it. Like, Frank Drebin is kind of like this egotistical cop who, he wants to stop crime, but he doesn't really care how he stops it, as long as it's like something on his record that makes him look good. There's that whole scene where they go to the file cabinet and Ed's talking to Frank, and Frank finds this evidence and he goes, "Oh, look, it's so-and-so's case. I guess he was innocent all along." And Ed says to him, he was given the chair 2 years ago. And he just goes, "Oh, well," and just puts it in the file. Like, and then it's just bam, on to the next thing. Like, that's great. Immediately you see, like, he doesn't really have much remorse for what happened.
See, I also think they're laughing at the audience a little bit too, because we follow these people and love that, even though they've done setups or they break the rules or bend the rules. I mean, Dirty Harry begat 6 pictures, I think. So, Rambo is in his version of justice. How many films has that
Oh my
been
God.
now? But but I mean, I think they're laughing at us a little bit for an audience for thinking that that's perfectly acceptable. We like that in our cops. We like that in our heroes. When Dirty Harry first came out in 1972, it was very controversial that he was sort of bending the rules a little bit. You look at it now, he doesn't seem to have bent them that much. We've come a long way, baby, since then. But in 72, when there were a lot of question of moral authority and what we were in Vietnam for, and Watergate, and Nixon was a crook, even though he said he wasn't, people started to ask where the authority really was. And so if people were bending a little bit to go against sort of the grain that wasn't working, that was acceptable, until now, where we've accepted it so much that we wouldn't accept a television show without a character as a law enforcer or a lawyer who didn't somehow sort of break the rules all the time. And Frank Drebin is, I think, a reflection of that. And when he makes jokes about it, we laugh, but we maybe laugh a little bit because we're guilty of, sort of endorsing that kind of behavior, and at least on television and movies.
Yeah, it's very self-aware humor. It's telling the audience, hey, this is wrong. Let's have a laugh at it. It's kind of like when Liam Neeson was doing press for this new film. He said, we're all effed, so let's have so it's good to have a giggle. And I just thought, that's a good point. But with the original, what I liked about it is the fact that it does kind of commentate on Americans' like love for violent characters who go out and they get revenge on their own. And of course, all these movies end satirically with the bad guy getting killed and, cartoony and humorous ways. I mean, the thing I liked about this movie, like what I was saying earlier, is that it's like a live action cartoon. It has all these goofy booping and bopping sounds, but it's played seriously, and it's also like timed wonderfully. I like what they do with the frame in the movie. Like, I like how a lot of times you'll see the cops walking through a station, and then walking past the camera will be some sort of like wacky gag that you don't see coming. And that's the great thing about the jokes in this movie, is that you don't know what the joke's going to be. You don't see it coming from a mile away. I think that's why like the third one didn't work as well for me up until they get to the Oscars. Like, once they do the Phil Donahue thing, like, that's hilarious. But the other stuff, you're just kind of like, oh, okay, I see where this punchline is going to go. I see where it's going to come from.
I think the more you do these,
clever.
Mike, I think the more you do these films, the sophistication of them, I dare say, is what separates the better ones from the acceptable ones. Certainly worth a few good laughs at home on a weekend night, or with friends over for a sleepover or something. I think they became probably a little bit more appealing to kids, just like I think Spaceballs in the world of Mel Brooks is more loved by kids than any adults who really love more of like Young Frankenstein. I think is working at a much more intellectual level. But the one thing that I think is missing in a lot of these subsequent sequels as they go on, however, they do come back pretty well in this new one, as we'll talk about in a minute. But like going back to the first Naked Gun, at the end when Ricardo Montalban is killed by being thrown over the stadium wall,
squished like
and squished. It's very Wile E. Coyote or cartoony stuff. And then you have it gets worse because he's
it keeps building on the joke. That's what's so funny about it.
Cement roller, and then but here's where the extra bit of sophistication works, whether people realize it or not, but it does, because somebody who was in the creative process thought of it, and it makes it funnier. And that is when the USC marching band comes across Ricardo Montalban. It's the entire band, and of course it's funny because before he was rolled over by a car, and then he's a steam roller, and then now he's getting trampled on by 50 or 60 musicians all around. What makes that really funny is somebody said, and the song that every goddamn band plays at the halftime show is that version of the marching band version of Louie Louie. It's not quite Louie Louie, but it's got that and everybody knows it, and so it has a little extra spin on it that I think gives it we're milking this joke for the third time. First he's run over, then he's really run over, now he's really trampled over. But what makes it a little bit extra funnier and smarter is that picking that right music cue. That's somebody's been watching college football and knows the standard music that ignites every audience, and they play it at every halftime show.
Yeah, see, and that's what a good joke does. It doesn't just have like one punchline and then that's it. It has like multiple punchlines with multiple layers to it. Like there was for instance, the old Simpsons episodes worked because I think we were talking about during the podcast or after, but when they had the whole film festival episode, like the whole joke is that Barney Gumble, who's like this drunk who doesn't really know what's going on around him because Homer kind of ruined his life, getting him into alcoholism. He ends up making this beautiful art film, but Homer, who's sort of like the audience or like most audience goers, they don't want to see that. They just want to see people get hit with a football in the groin.
This was during the America's Funniest Home Videos.
Yeah.
Now in its, I think, 25th year or something on television. It's like that's basically just seeing Dad getting hitting the nuts with a wiffle ball from a kid in a plastic bat. And that's what George, the Homer's movie.
They added with George C. Scott.
They keep
getting
building the joke. Into the nuts.
Yeah, exactly. Because at first it's just an old man with the nuts, but then they come back later and they're like, "Oh no, we got more. We're gonna put in George C. Scott because he's like the most serious guy you can think of."
Yeah, and he overacts it, even though it's already pretty broad when you get hit in the groin.
Yeah, and then but the funniest bit was the whole movie that Homer's watching is about the dangers of alcoholism and how it destroyed his friend's life, which we found out in later episodes that he kind of got him into it. But instead of really reflecting on it, he just says to himself, "Wow, I'll never drink a beer again." And you think, okay, that's the punchline. But then a guy comes in and he says, "Beer here," and he goes, "One, please." And it's like he hasn't learned anything. Right, and that's kind of like the joke with these movies. It's like Drebin doesn't really learn a lot, if anything at all.
Yeah, he's kind of clueless the entire time, and there's no real arc for him. He remains clueless, although somehow, because of the absurdity of society, he manages winning just by being clueless.
Yeah, exactly. That reminds me of another episode of The Simpsons with Frank Grimes, but I won't get into all that. But
well, it's interesting to talk about comedy, and you had originally asked about why comedy is not working as much. I mean, there's lots of foils. I mean, I think, like I said, satire has replaced sort of earnest comedy more. I think it's harder to make people laugh because they've seen so much of it. There's so many comedians. There's so many sitcoms. We've watched comedy and cartoons and everything that's laughing and funny and silliness for decades now. So, it's hard to keep making people laugh through surprise, which a lot of comedy has to be sort of unexpected or something. It's a rug pull, but for example, like when you said, if there's a laugh after the laugh, like most people today are content, and most sitcoms are content with, set up line, punchline.
Yeah.
Set up line, punchline. It's kind of that rhythm throughout most sitcoms if you watch them, except the ones that are a little bit more sophisticated. But if they were shot in front of studio audiences like Two and a Half Men or some of those kind of things, it was, sort of a line that sets up and moves the story, then sort of the build-up line to the punchline that is the bridge between that plot moving line and the comedy line, and then boom, the punchline. But one of the things that is a lost art to a degree today, and I'm going to throw a name that your viewers can maybe look up and watch some of his movies if they get a chance, is Blake Edwards. Blake Edwards, I think, is one of the last great comic geniuses of cinema who had a look and a feel to his films, the way the characters run. But he also was known particularly well for physical comedy that was set up with sort of what I just explained, but there was always a joke after the joke. Like you think, oh my God, this is such a great thing, but then there's something else after it. And, if you wait for it and you wait, but that's something else coming. I mean, it's really, there's examples of that throughout his movies, but, for example, it sometimes could be a line. It sometimes is another funny bit. And oftentimes it's just somebody's reaction to something, and that used to be a sort of staple of comedies. And Blake Edwards really perfected it because it was always starting to wane by the time he was doing his movies in the 60s and 70s and early 80s. But you don't see it very often. You get a little bit closer to it in these kind of movies because there's, to your point, there's stuff going on in the background. Maybe something goes on in the foreground, but and sometimes maybe there's a little bit of extra something after it. Like the music, Louie Louie is not quite the same thing, but it's a little bit of after the fact, like, oh, that was even funnier because they're playing that same tune that every college band plays. So it's, I think comedy is, well, somebody once said, a famous actor, I forget who it was. Some say it was Edmund Gwenn, but I think it might have been Evan Keane, the name was. But when he was on his deathbed, they asked if it was hard dying, and he said, dying is easy, comedy is hard.
Yeah, it is. I think it's the hardest category to nail.
It is, and yet that's the one category that the Academy generally ignores for acting, because they always have to nominate the serious, biopic or the war film or Holocaust film or something that's terribly tragic with a capital T. But very rarely do comedic performances win. And something like this, I mean, Liam Neeson will be lucky to get a Golden Globe nomination, even though he's so good in the new one. But, if you go back at the history of the Oscars, there's very few performances, even in the last 25 years, that get sort of acknowledged. I mean, Nora, a little bit of a comedy performance, sort of by
I can't
Mikey
remember.
Madison. Mikey Madison.
Yeah.
So sort of a dramedy. I mean, that's the closest you get to somebody taking those things. You'll get like the Octavia Spencer, mostly for her supporting role in The Help, was kind of funny, especially when she baked her poo in the pie, and things like that. So that's a place where they get awarded. But I mentioned to you before we went to air, but Kevin Kline, a very serious dramatic actor, who's also a very funny actor, musical comedy on stage, won a couple of Tonys for such fare. He won his Best Supporting Actor Oscar for A Fish Called Wanda, which is a farce. And it is so rare that anybody gets nominated for a farce. But of course, what does the Academy do? They nominated a dramatic actor who did a farce, so, he's really working hard. Yeah, it's a different kind of role. That's why comedians don't often get nominations and let alone wins.
Yeah, I don't think Ace Ventura would get any nominations.
Well, Jim Carrey,
but Jim Carrey, he has done some great dramatic roles. Yeah.
Well, Chris Rock said it's great that Jim Carrey got nominated or was considered nominated for and won Golden Globes for like Man on the Moon and The Truman Show. He didn't get nominated as they thought he was going to. He didn't even get nominated for Eternal Sunshine, which was a more dramatic sort of straight.
It was a very straight role for him. He actually, it was like opposites. He was like the straight guy, and Kate Winslet was the goofball.
A little more goofball. Yeah. But Chris Rock said, I know 24 actors who could have done The Truman Show. I don't know anybody but Jim Carrey who could have pulled off Dumb and Dumber. Yeah. And it's kind of true if you think about it. For him to be able to make that seem like a real person who's got his head up his ass and yet sort of childlike and sweet and innocent in certain ways, but also crude and vicious. And I mean, there aren't that many actors who are that funny that can do that.
But they tried to replicate that.
Yeah, they did.
Like Dumb and Dumber. And it was like a prequel, and they just tried to copy what Jim Carrey and Jeff Bridges did. And not Jeff Bridges, Jeff, it's one of the Jeffs.
We're blanking on him now. I can't remember his name. Shoot, I should know it off.
That's okay. But Jeff Daniels, that was
Daniels. There we go, Jeff Daniels, who was often played very serious characters and won Emmys.
Yeah, they said it was going to ruin his career. Like his agent told him that when he was going to do.
But he was he had range,
Yeah, no, because he was great, and you could tell like him and Carrie get along really well, and that's what works. There's like a good chemistry between all the characters in this movie. There was one funny bit where I was like Wikipediaing the first film, and I guess the the real Queen Elizabeth did visit them,
Oh,
and
really?
yeah, and she said
That
like
actress
every
showed up in everything.
oh,
I
I'm
mean,
sorry, it
Queen
was the
Elizabeth looked like.
I think it was the actress, but
Oh,
Leslie Nielsen eventually met the real Queen.
oh, okay.
But the actress who played the Queen, she said like Priscilla Presley and Leslie Nielsen were very charming, and O.J. Simpson was rude. But then again, I wonder if she was saying that in the context of after the murder.
Well,
She was like, "I'll
possible,
just
but
throw
he
him
was
under the
also
bus."
maybe the biggest star there. I mean, he was as a
Yeah,
football legend. He was certainly bigger than Priscilla Presley was, who was probably a B actress, and then
yeah,
Leslie Nielsen, who was only kind of new to comedy or whatever. But but it is funny because I think part of the reason that people accepted Jeff Daniels in Dumb and Dumber is because he had done serious fare before, and we'd seen him in that, so we knew he was a good actor. Just same as with the Kevin Kline thing. Maybe in some respects, I think Leslie Nielsen not being a comedic actor, it made it funnier because he played it like he was doing it.
yeah.
One of
Like he's really a
those
cop.
dramatic roles from
Yeah.
all the television series he was in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's why it would work. But wrapping it up with this film, what would you give Naked Gun 1988? I believe I'm correct.
I would give
Naked
it
Gun
3
Pilot.
stars. I mean,
3
I think
stars. Okay.
Airplane and Police Squad for me would be 4, but this one I would give 3, and it may have come down from 3.5. I think at the time I liked it better. I watched it yesterday just to catch up with it. It was a little broader than I remembered it being, especially compared to sort of, I think, some of the straighter stuff that had gone before it, and to some degree with this new one. So three Guinnesses.
Okay. I'm going to give it 4. It's my favorite of all time.
Oh, really?
And
Okay.
yeah, it's my favorite comedy. And I think it's because like I like Airplane, but I feel like the humor's a little too centered on just disaster movies, and it's not broad enough. I actually like kind of how broad the Naked Gun comedy is. It's something everyone can get of all ages. And then of
Sure.
course, when you get older, you're like, oh, that joke's even more funny than I didn't even think about that. So it does all that stuff, and the comedic timing is absolutely brilliant. And it's something you can watch real fast. And whenever I'm in a depressed mood, it gets me out of it. Like
True.
I
You
absolutely
can see that.
love that movie. And yeah, there's a lot of movies that try to imitate it, and of course, Naked Gun is an imitator of Airplane, although it's the same creator, so it's not really an imitator. But
Right.
it's something that proves like, oh, this is how comedy should work, where the parody is not just taking topical events and
Right.
placing them in the script. That was one thing I was worried about as we now transition into the new Naked Gun with Seth MacFarlane's involvement in the Naked Gun,
Mhm.
because I think we talked about on our South Park podcast how I think Seth MacFarlane's a very talented guy. I think he's a very funny guy, but I don't like Family Guy. Like, I just think Family Guy is a lot of random pop culture references where, they walk into Peter's room and they say something and Peter says, "Oh, you think that's bad? Remember the time I met Gary Coleman?" And then they just cut to him with Gary Coleman. You're like, what? Why is that in there? What? So I was worried it was going to be a lot of those jokes, but it wasn't. It actually was a very good spiritual successor. Not spiritual successor. It's a legacy sequel to the original Naked Gun films. And one thing that started to present promise for me was that they were bringing in Liam Neeson, as you said earlier, Oscar Schindler, and of course the guy from Taken. Does anyone even know his character's name from Taken? Yeah,
I'd have to look it up. I don't remember either.
Yeah,
that's not good, I suppose.
Yeah,
that's very funny.
Because everyone's like Liam Neeson from Taken. I'm like, yeah, but what is his character's name? And they're like, I don't even remember it. But yeah,
I'm looking it up right now because we got to find out before we move on. Because I cannot remember what his character's name was.
It's all right. It's not that important. But but what they did is they took this guy super serious and they put him in this role where he plays it even more serious than Leslie Nielsen does. But it works in the context of it. And yeah, I mean, when I saw that first trailer, I was sold. And I'll show a little clip from the trailer that will kind of show you the type of humor it has. It's only 11 seconds, but I'll explain how this is actually spiritually similar to the original films, but also sort of its own little thing.
Hey, little girl, stop!
What do you want, little one?
Your ass.
Now that's great because you don't expect a little girl to be a 6'3", 73-year-old Irishman pretending to be a cop. But immediately I'm going, okay, they get the tone. It's silly, but at the same time, everyone's playing it serious.
Yep.
And it's completely zany, and it's got the really smart, funny dialogue in it. And I'm gonna throw up the spoiler banner, so because I am gonna spoil some punchlines here. But what it does is there's like a great joke where they're looking at the murals of all the fathers of the cops, because Frank Drebin is Frank Drebin Jr. in this movie, which is a little weird because Liam Neeson's like 73 years old. Like, how young was Frank when he had that kid? While Ed Hawkins Jr. is like 38 or something, But anyways, what they do is like you have those great moments where they look at the murals of their fathers. You cut to the mural O.J. Simpson, and you cut to his son, and he just goes, no, and you kind of get right away. Okay, they're doing the topical humor, but it's also stuff where it's not just like the headline of the week that they're making fun of. Because this movie could have easily been about them constantly looking at their phones and putting social media within the film itself. But no, it actually feels old school. It feels like old punchlines that are delivered, and they're delivered with really good timing. I think Akiva Schaffer, who directed it, did a very good job at understanding how to play the material straight, how to time the jokes, how to build upon the jokes so they're extra funny. Like one example of a built upon joke is in the trailer it looks lame, but in the movie it's actually really funny, where they're looking at a police tape or like a body cam footage of Frank Drebin, and he's eating a chili cheese dog, and he ends up having to go to the bathroom. And the joke could have been he like craps his pants and that's it. Or that he evacuates people from a building so then he can use the bathroom, which they do, but they build upon it. And they keep fast forwarding the tape and it keeps going, where it's like at first he pulls a guy over who's like, his hair is long, and like he opens up his glove compartment, a bunch of like drugs fall out and a gun, and he has to go to the bathroom so bad. He's just like, you know what? You seem like an all right guy. I'm going to let you go. And he goes to his car. That's funny because that's something cops would do. They would just let go random white people. And then, of course, when he gets to the bathroom, he shoots the gun in the air, getting everyone out of there so he can use the bathroom. And the whole joke is like police abusing their power, so then they can, do whatever they want. And that was kind of the whole joke behind that. And it kind of does stuff like that that's really clever and old school and not just like random, stupid, poopy humor. It's actually like humor that builds upon a joke that keeps going, just like the old movies did. And it's just filled with those kind of jokes that legitimately had me laughing, where I was worried, it would just be like a Family Guy episode. And it's nothing like that at all. It's great.
Yeah, in fact, I have to be honest with you. I think this one is more disciplined than, in many respects, than the 88 version, which does throw a lot of random things in there that don't necessarily fit. And I think the way it's overlit, which is not really of the 88 time period, it's just to let us know that it's comedy, because comedies are always brightly lit. We can't really have too many dark comedies unless they're dark comedies. But what I liked about this one is a couple of things that I think work on, dare I say, the more intellectual level. You just said how it works on all three levels right there in that one sort of set piece. Okay, he's got to go to the bathroom, so we're expecting explosive diarrhea or at least loud farts at some point. Yeah. And because it's all about taking a dump, that's the low level. The mid-level is, okay, they're having fun with, the way it's cut, and Frank's getting embarrassed, and he keeps telling them, fast forward the tape, and this part isn't important, which is, sustaining the gag and making us aware of how comedy is building and all that. That's a little more of the smart kind of stuff that is well written. The place where it works on the funny level is not only, of course, that here's Liam Neeson who's being embarrassed, even though he's the character, and as Brian Mills, the character in Taken, he was never embarrassed because he walked into any room where there was 10 henchmen or one and knew exactly what he needed to do, and growled his lines, But the higher brow that it works on is exactly what you said, is this is a parody of how cops can get away with being judge, jury, and executioner. They flash their badge, they flash their gun, they decide who gets to go and who doesn't, who they stop for what reasons, maybe their skin color or other things. But it's working on all that, and all that we know of over the years of the way the police departments have not had the best reputations because of a lot of those kinds of scandals. That's what this movie does so well, I think, from the beginning to the end. I mean, for example, when Liam Neeson is trying to have Pam Anderson distract Danny Houston, the villain in it, by talking to him in his Bengal nightclub for the elite.
Oh, what's he doing? The jazz?
In the background, we see Liam Neeson bully his way and beat this doorman, the sort of bouncer, to get in there. It's very funny. That's the kind of slapsticky level. As in front of us is the trope that we all know from these kind of movies, where the girl has to be distracting to the bad guy so the other guy can do something. But what makes it especially funny is then afterwards, to keep the ruse going, and the villain, concentrating on her, and he says he loves jazz, she gets up on stage and starts scat singing, which is a parody of scat singing. How many people in this day and age know what scat singing is? But it's a very funny parody. And yet the great thing about Pamela Anderson doing it is she never acts like, okay, I'm making fun of Ella Fitzgerald and Mel Torme.
Yeah.
She does it, and it's pretty funny. It's just this side of not being real scat, but that's another level of intellectualism applied to a scene that was already pretty funny, with parodying the tropes from the film noir and the cops genres, as well as just the physicality of beating up somebody when it's 20 feet away, but the guy can't see it, though we can see it because it's in the background and the way it's framed, we're catching it. That's a lot of this movie. I mean, even the casting of CCH Pounder as his boss. How many times has she played that role in real movies or real television series? I'll bet at least half a dozen, and she never bats an eye, even when she's saying, like, well, my husband is sleeping and don't wake him because he has trouble. And even at the end when she's dragging him around at the mixed martial arts thing, and he's still got the sleep mask on, she never bats an eye to let us know that she knows this is a joke. No, she's a serious, gung-ho, totally dedicated, sense of humorless police captain. So it works on all those levels continually throughout here. Danny Houston's performance in this film is not that different from the villain he played in Wonder Woman. He's played very good villains in many movies.
Other, like, he's played a villain, like he was a villain in the remake of The Crow.
Yeah, he's been the villain in so many. He's a great villain, but he never winks at us, letting you know it's funny. Ricardo Montalban occasionally in The Naked Gun would overdo a line, letting us know that he knew this was supposed to be funny. That's okay. It's not terrible, but here it's just all the better by these people. And this is, again, I think to your point, credit to Akiva Schaffer, that he makes sure that there's nothing in the eyes that gives it away. There's nothing knowing in their performance that would give it away. And that also goes for, I dare say, the cinematography, the editing. This film, if you didn't see the gags in there, this could be a Die Hard movie. It could be a Michael Bay movie. It could be any of the Bruce Willis movies over the last 30 years. It's night, it's rainy, it's dark, it's gleamy. It has all this, well shot and well cut violence in many regards. And that's funny too, that Schaffer decided, hey, I'm going to keep this as straight as a comedy can be by making all that stuff look as straight as it can be as well.
Yeah, one thing I will say, I kind of wish it was shot a little more like a comedy, because the old Zucker films, like the police station, everything, every set looked like a set, so it's kind of like
back in those days they did. You have to understand, Mike. In those days, I mean, like, have you ever seen Columbo?
Yeah.
Can you believe the lighting in that? It's terrible.
Oh, it's terrible. It's
all the shows that unite, all the
light.
Universal shows and movies from the 60s and 70s. Look at that. Look at Airport, which is a pretty good disaster movie as those kind of things go, from 1970. And the way the interior of that plane is shot, it looks so much like an interior on a stage.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't have any resemblance to the way that stuff is lit and stuff. That's the difference between movies in the 70s, or to some degree, the TV shows still marching into the 80s. A lot of times they didn't look real. They looked like sets.
Well, I think
they may be very good sets.
Yeah,
but they still look like sets. Here they look like more like real locations.
Yeah, and now
that's what TV and movies do now. They have much more. They've strived to make it seem at least more believable in those realms.
Yeah, and I can understand why they would use that as good. I just kind of miss that old because I think they did try to make it intentionally look a little fake in
Yes,
the
a little.
original.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, like not too much, but just like a
Right.
little bit.
Right.
And here it's like I just kind of wanted a little bit of that subtlety where you feel like, oh, that set
Well,
off
and
with the
maybe
last.
that, to your
Yeah,
point, Mike, and now
yeah,
that I'm thinking about it, it may be that some of the jokes are missed. Like there's a great scene where they're
yeah,
taking pictures of a criminal in front of the height chart
yeah,
behind him, and the photographer is treating him like he's a model, like
yeah,
sort of getting up close to him and hand
yeah,
holding the camera and all that. And it looks so believable in this sort of police room setting that doesn't look artificial, that it almost takes you a second to realize what's going on there. Where
yeah,
in, I think the
yeah.
earlier things, you would have seen that from the get-go, that it was a little bit supposed to be out of place there, even though it is in this place.
Yeah, but and some of the color was a little like when you're looking at all the murals you can see in the trailers, like really yellow. It kind of looks like a Wes Anderson film, and it's like I wish because the color grading in today's movies are weird. They're like a single color. They're very lazily done. Although this one, I think the color was decent, but I still wanted like a flatter palette. Like when I saw Happy Gilmore 2, that's an example of a bad legacy sequel compared to a good one.
I have not seen that one.
Oh yeah, because Happy
It
Gilmore
just dropped
2,
Friday though, right? Or Thursday?
like last week, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
But like Happy Gilmore 2, it just like repeats all the same jokes from the old movie
Mm.
and has like a ton of cameos, which like some are funny. There's like one from Steve Buscemi and one from John Daly that's real funny where he's like a recurring character. But like the look of it is really off. And I looked up who the cinematographer was, and it was this guy who shot like House of Cards. So Happy Gilmore 2 had this weird blue tint to it where like everything was blue, like an episode of House of Cards. And I pointed it out in my review. And then, of course, when I looked up the DP, I went, oh, that makes sense. Netflix just went within their own hiring department and used their own same color grading department. And everything that's shot today is color graded and look like every movie, like from a drama to a thriller to a comedy, like every movie looks the same now. They don't really have that much of a visual difference to them. So I wish there was that kind of difference where, because like even Happy Gilmore 2, when they like would show a character from like the last film, they would cut to the last film and I'm like, oh, that looks pretty natural. And then they would cut to the current film and I'm like, ugh. But this one, it wasn't too bad. One missed opportunity, I will say, with the film, which I thought they wouldn't miss out on, which they put it at the end credits and they just re-rolled the beginning of the film, which I thought was kind of lazy, was they didn't have the police siren going around with the cop car in ridiculous settings. And I thought that was a great opportunity where I like the fact that this movie doesn't repeat the same jokes. I like the fact that they're all new jokes and they're all very funny. Well, maybe a couple missed, but I don't remember a lot that missed. But it would have been great to see that intro with like new settings where the cop car could be, I don't know, because like they had it through the trenches of the Death Star, like in the third one. Like what if
I mean, I think they did that in the old days because first of all, coming off of the Police Squad television series, there was a cop show that literally did that a few years prior to that. So they are spoofing that because it was told from that. And I think they even did that to some degree in things like Hawaii Five-0 or the FBI, some of those other shows. It became a trope. So they were appearing it there. And really, it's not that known to us. I think that was a nod to Police Squad because they used the same at
the very end where they just re-roll it.
Which was a little
again.
nod to the history of it as far as sort of something they would play. A lot of times they'll do that where they'll play the original theme song. I remember when Spider-Man came out, they played a little bit of the original Spider-Man theme song during the end credits just to say, oh, here we go, we've got to fill 5 minutes and we'll play something that everybody knows from their childhood. So I think that was part of it. But the one thing that I think was clever about the cinematography, at least in the new Naked Gun, is they specifically were vamping some very famous scenes, whether people realize it or not. But that whole opening with the bank robbery is very much the way Christopher Nolan shot the beginning of The Dark Knight with the Joker and his henchmen. So they're doing
with the
some
smoke and dragging them out.
But they're doing some specifics with the yellows and the bright sun coming through the big skylight. That's absurd that a bank would have that, and no foliage around it. But it's subtler and they cast some very good actors in the supporting roles, and it's played very well. But I mean, I have to give Liam Neeson credit. He commits to this. He's running about and falling about and doing all this kind of stuff, and it's a very disciplined performance. And it's funny. They were asking him on the junket, what's his favorite role he ever played, and he wouldn't answer. And Pam Anderson said, "Well, I imagine Schindler's probably the most important one you did." And he kind of nodded that. But see, I think he approaches all of his acting the same way. He's playing a character. He knows what the material is asking him to do, and he's committed to it. And even though this is silliness, he's committed to being the best silly he can be.
Yeah, and he plays it so straight that you never think
right.
for a second.
That's the best silly he can be.
Yeah,
by making it all the sillier by playing it completely serious.
Yeah, and
It's
Pamela
really funny.
Anderson, I thought, was a great successor to Priscilla Presley.
Well, even better, because I think she's a better actress. I mean, not that either of them are exactly Helen Mirren, but I think Pamela Anderson is at least very self-aware enough to know how to spoof herself and sort of spoof the femme fatale. Priscilla Presley did it somewhat, but she wasn't like
It was very
a known
one-note,
entity
yeah.
before. So, there wasn't as much that she could bring to the part, I don't think.
Yeah, because Priscilla Presley just said all of her lines like
Yes.
this.
And she did have a cameo in this. They cut to her watching the news.
Oh,
Yeah,
really?
they cut to her for one shot where they showed a bunch of people watching the mixed martial art and the news stuff going on. But I don't know why they didn't give her more to do. But
yeah, it would have been funny if she was like Frank Drebin's like wife or something like that, and you just see like
his
a
mother or
picture of
something,
Frank like on the
So,
side, and But I thought not Priscilla Presley. I thought Pamela Anderson was great. Like you're saying, the skit scat bit that she did was really kind of clever. And yeah, she plays the dame, the femme fatale, although she doesn't really kill anyone, but she plays it really well because she's kind of like meant for that story of her career. I never would have thought I would see her in dramatic movies or consider her as an actress, but like look at how time has changed. And
well, I like the fact too that they cast somebody who was closer to Liam Neeson. Done a 25-year-old in that role, nobody would have batted an eye. But the fact that she's, I think, and she doesn't, try to that, which is smart because it's still funny, but it seems to still play in the character and a little bit more of the serious tone that I think everybody else is playing too.
Yeah, I wish I kind of gave him some more funny moments, because even George Kennedy had some moments that had me really laughing.
Yeah, he didn't do as much in this as you maybe want him to. But if they do a sequel to it, and I think this movie will probably do well enough to warrant a sequel, maybe they'll give him more to do there. But I love the fact that at least cast him in there, because he's good at just reacting the way he did to certain things, and he's a very good actor, as opposed to throwing it away on somebody who. Somebody said maybe it was Akiva Schaffer or whomever. I mean, the writers did a very good job on writing this too. Akiva working with Dan Greger and Doug Mann, but they did a very good job of making sure that the parts were played by good actors. I also think one of the other big in jokes, again, this works on that intellectual level, is Kevin Durand plays the mysterious blonde-haired sort of like special guy who goes in to get the plot device from the the bank, which is very funny. That's the first big laugh in the film, and. He's played that role, and like that character has been in there since Gary Busey played in Lethal Weapon, and that special, sort of elevated henchman. And Kevin Durand has played a few of those kind of characters too. So this again could have been him in a regular movie that he might have done for Michael Bay, but it's him doing it in a satire that, for the most part, is all the funnier because it looks like it could be one of those regular films.
Yeah, I mean, this movie works because it's played straight, and it's also not just tabloid jokes, and it's the fact that like it does have that intellectualism that you said that's attached to it. Like my favorite joke in the movie, which the movie kind of takes a chance going this far with the jokes, but at the same time, in the context of recent history, it makes sense. He's trying to find a lead, and he's talking to this one guy. And the guy says to him, "You killed my brother." And he goes, "Well, I killed a lot of people." And he goes, "He was white." And he goes, "Oh, you're so-and-so." Like immediately.
He remembers the one because he's only killed one white guy. I know that gets a big laugh too. Yeah. So there's, what it is? There's a knowingness to this. And by knowingness, it's just like they know that we will get what they're making fun of, because it works on those levels that require a little bit more thought, but not that you have to mull it over and think about it for 3 minutes before, you then start to laugh because, oh, I get what they were meaning. It's fast, but it's still like they're willing to say it. They're willing to go there. They're willing to do a little bit. And it's a real plot. I mean, it's not that different from the plot of Paradise, which was the big Sterling K. Brown hit on Apple Plus TV this last spring, where, there's a whole world that's being carved out to start anew for the richest billionaires and billionaires who can afford it, and the other people who are deemed celebrated or important enough to go there as well. That's the plot going on here as a ludicrous one or in a comedy, but it's been the plot of plenty of serious films and TV shows as well. So, and they keep true to that plot. That's the climax here. That's the thing. Just like the plot was to kill Queen Elizabeth to make an international incident.
Yeah.
And, even though it's taking place at the All-American California Angels baseball game, and Reggie Jackson is the killer, which was so funny, and they got him to do all that stuff and climb over the dugout and like a robot. I mean, they're playing it pretty true to the time and who is popular and what were kind of themes and yet having fun with them.
I forgot about the whole Enrico Palazzo thing.
Oh, that's funny too. Where when they say when Frank is shown to be the guy who saved it all, and they go, "Hey, it's Enrico Palazzo," because they knew him as the guy who came in to sing the Star Spangled Banner, and just did a bad job, even though he's supposed to be an opera singer.
And he's frisking every single baseball player when they're on the plate.
I love it too. Like when they in the old, they didn't do it much in this one. I don't know, maybe that joke wouldn't play today. Yeah. But back in the old days of television comedy and drama, a lot of times when they cut to the action scene, they would clearly cut to a stuntman who looked nothing like the person. And they had with even like the moonwalking umpire that Frank Drebin was supposed to be in that first Naked Gun movie. That's clearly not him, and he's doing all these dance moves that clearly that's a dancer dressed up, but you don't see him because he's got the face mask on, let alone Ricardo Montalban dragging Priscilla Presley up through the stands, and clearly it's a man shorter than Montalban is throwing around a doll, a dummy. Didn't do any of that here, but those kind of things were very much a parody of the shows in that era that did that all the time and did their weakest work ever to try to cover up that fact. It's like, they're going to know it's fake. Why do we know there? Oh, that person's a full foot shorter. That doesn't matter. Just do it anyway. Let's get a shot home. That was kind of the take on then, and they parodied that very well in the first one.
And it's cool how in this one, like the jokes are like sort of spiritual successors to the other jokes. Like for instance, like going back to the whole chili cheese dog joke, that's kind of a successor to the hot mic while peeing joke. Like people aren't supposed to be seeing Frank have to go to the bathroom or hear him, but he does. But it updates it in a way where you're not thinking, oh, they're just doing that again. They're actually doing something different enough. Where it's new and unique and creative, and
they also paid homage, Mike, to your favorite film, because of course one of the funniest things at the end of the first one is all the different baseball announcers playing themselves, saying ridiculous things or crying or getting upset, and here they have the MMA announcers saying really ridiculous things, particularly where they're describing, Frank Drebin's junk when his pants came off.
Oh yeah,
and the fact that that works on that other intellectual level, because of course Liam Neeson has a reputation in Hollywood as being rather, dare I say, prolific or whatever the word is in that department. So I was kind of shocked.
Never knew that.
Well, now you do, sir. Kind of surprised that they went there. That used to be one of the things that. Used to be a sort of whispered about thing, and they make a joke about it here, and God love Liam Neeson for being in on it, but it's also funny that they got the real MMA announcers to like talk about that almost the same way they would be describing a certain move that somebody won a match with. It was very funny and yet a lovely homage to the first film.
Yeah, I mean the other kind of jokes that they do that are real funny are like misinterpretation jokes where someone thinks they see something but really it's something else. It's like when the guy has the thermal vision goggles, and there's the dog with Pamela Anderson and she's cleaning an oven, but it looks like she's blowing him, and then the dog comes in, and that's the funniest thing is like Yeah, like with Naked Gun with the first one and other things, it's like, oh, you think they got humiliated? Well, it gets worse, and then it
Right,
gets
right.
worse,
Well,
because
and
then
they
they're
did,
having
and they,
sex, they're blowing the dog's blowing
right.
them, they're doggy styling the dog, like,
Well, one difference too that's kind of a nice subtle thing, and again, hats off to Mr. Schaffer for this. But when they cut back to Liam Neeson and Pamela Anderson, they seem to be pretty normal looking.
yeah,
They're not really in anything that you would argue would be extravagant
yeah,
looking. Like, okay, they're doing this to make, like in the Austin Power movies when they did those same silhouette jokes.
yeah.
When they cut back to Austin and Miss, his the girlfriend or whoever it was, Heather Graham or
Oh, yeah,
Elizabeth
Heather Graham, the
Hurley.
second one, Elizabeth
Yeah,
Hurley's first one, yeah.
right. They were in a little bit broad positions to begin with, to
Yeah.
make that truly come off as sort of the ridiculous look. Here, it's just him holding the turkey baster and feeding the gravy to the dog
To the
the way
dog,
you
and
might
it
have
looks
done.
like he's
And
gonna fellatio, yeah.
Filleted. It's just, it's
Yeah.
Mrs. Kensington didn't. She was a little more broad than that baby.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and there are just so many great. I think one of my favorite lines is like, I'm the police, they can't stop me. What are they gonna do? The police are gonna arrest me? Yes. And they just kind of cut to him and he's like, whatever. He just ignores it. But
Yeah.
oh yeah, and of course there's that great gag where he's just driving in the car and then like someone hands him a coffee, although he's
Oh, the
driving
coffee
full
gag.
speed.
It gets a
Yeah.
laugh every time because every cop, whether it's CSI or
Oh, yeah.
the modern stuff, they're always carrying coffee into the crime scene and all that. I did one of the subtler jokes that got a big laugh when I saw it today was because I saw it this morning. Is they have the cops always putting on the gloves too before they enter
Oh
the crime
yeah.
scene. And as soon as Frank puts on the gloves, he
Bare
like picks
hands.
his nose or whatever. It's like, well, there goes that glove. But then it just is a throwaway gag. And they had all the movies, including even the stuff that's not as good. They've done the same thing. But this one had some ones like that, which were, you might not even necessarily have caught it because it's not a blatant one, but it's still there and it's still funny if you do.
That's what's cool about those movies. You can see them so many times. You'll be like, "Oh, I missed that joke. That's real fun. Oh, there's that joke."
Right.
And that's kind of what they do.
Right.
Is they just keep building and building, and that's what
Right.
makes it work. I think for today's day and age, we really need a comedy like this because the news is depressing. Things are really kind of down. So you see this, it gives you a good laugh, and it's a genuine laugh. And and we haven't had a spoof that's worked this well in forever because we've had lesser writers who just take whatever the topical event is and then they just make date movie or they make I think I know what movie you're talking
Or their
about.
movie for that year.
300
Like,
was epic movie.
and but they've done like the scary movies. Then like they started to like this one was really one of them was really all about paranormal activity.
Yeah.
And they started to go after the particular successes in the genre, and there isn't anything necessarily wrong about that, but they seem very dated before they even came out in a way, or by the time they came out, it's like, well, okay, and will we be laughing at that as a classic in 10 years? Probably not. By the way, the original title of Scream was Scary Movie.
Wow.
Yeah, and they decided to go with Scream because it sounded more legit. And then, of course, when they did the parody of Scream, they called it Scary Movie.
Yeah, exactly.
But and back to the sort of beginning of the show, comedy, I think, has for a while there became oversaturated. I mean, you think about it with the Daily Show and I think even dramas are getting more and more funny now with little bits and sort of dark humor and stuff. But yeah, comedy, I think it's hard, and maybe the times because they are kind of dark and weird, and we've been in this weird funk for at least 10 years, if not 15 or 20, where there's so many divides and everybody listens to only the stuff they want to be convinced is the truth or whatever. It's hard to find a universal sort of humor with Colbert's being canceled. It's not only probably for the obvious political favors needed for the FCC to approve or whoever had to approve, I guess the president and the government to approve the merger, but also there's so many more shows and so many more stations that the nighttime talk show audiences don't really have the same clout as Johnny Carson once did, when I think
Yeah.
a third of the people were watching him if they were watching TV at 10:30. And now you've got so many different shows and possibilities and sports and 500 cable channels and other things online to amuse yourself with. And we know that the last two generations have not been watching television nearly as much. But to your point, it's hard to find comedy that people are that even a studio that's willing to take a big risk on. I mean, even sitcoms aren't what they used to be. We get more laughs, I think, out of watching people embarrass themselves on reality television programs and dating programs than necessarily in a typical sitcom that you used to watch 20, 30 years ago. It's funny, too, because growing up when I was a kid in the 70s, my God, sitcoms were king. You had so many great sitcoms. I mean, Saturday night alone on CBS, Mike, you had All in the Family, MASH, Mary Tyler Moore Show, The Bob Newhart Show, and Carol Burnett. That was 3 hours of great every Saturday night, and there are other nights like that. I mean, when ABC had their run with, Happy Days, Laverne and Shirley, Taxi, and, those days are long, long gone. But it's nice that a movie comes out that I think is playing pretty well with quite a few audiences, and I think they get it, and yet it's smart. It's pretty smart.
Yeah, and I think the reason we didn't get movies or spoofs like this film, like the Naked Gun movies in general for a while, is because a lot of people tried to do the same thing, but they weren't as good at it. They tried to rush them through the door, and they just weren't as funny. You would get movies like Movie 43, where it was just stupid crap humor with not a lot of intellect behind it. And this is like a return to form. This is like,
I also think there was a time where very recently, and maybe it's even still going on to some degree with comedy, where comedy became more recognizable, and then you would find the humor in it. And I mean, to some degree, that was the way it was in the 60s when they did things like, some of the shows that were family-oriented comedies, or but I mean, for every I Dream of Jeannie, you had a show like That Girl, which was about a young woman trying to find her place in society, and same with for every sort of silly comedy like Police Squad, you had Mary Tyler Moore, which seemed grounded in a certain amount of workplace family reality. But I would say that a few years back, the world of satire became almost just a representation of it. As Julia Louis-Dreyfus famously said when she won, I think, her 5th Emmy for Veep, she said, it's funny, when we started out, we were a satire, and now we're a documentary. And it's true, as funny as Veep was, and I think, honestly, Mike, for my money, I don't know if I've laughed at line for line a show that for line the way that movie did. And they didn't have a lot of physical comedy in that, but they did sometimes. But the lines were just nasty and mean, and yet they were probably pretty close to what real politics and that world is probably like. And you had other things that were playing closer to the bone that I think were funny, but not necessarily presented as comedy. And now I'd say the last great big sitcom that sort of captured all of America was Modern Family, which had certain broad moments in it, but by and large, it was representing, certainly a version of a Modern Family in LA with the older patriarch marrying a younger woman who has a child from a previous marriage, or the gay couple when that was first becoming a thing, when you could present that on television. And then sort of the traditional family of 5 that, by the Dumfies, but they were odd and sort of the modern version of, troubled teens and, sort of both parents having their own quirks and issues that they weren't necessarily fathers knows best on everything. But that's kind of the last time that I think comedy, to your point, resonated across the board for America. And one is really, as Julia Louis-Dreyfus said, a documentary, and the other is very funny, but grounded in a reality, if nothing, if not a modern reality, certainly a modern West Coast reality. But it's hard, I think, these days, because maybe there's just been too much and it's hard to find the universal truths. But spoofs and spoofs playing with, I think, the film industry and the way thrillers work, and rogue cops, and the Schwarzeneggers and the Willises and all those people, that plays very well. And even Liam Neeson. This is 10 years after Taken, and it's funny that he's doing a parody of himself in that role, very much the same kind of line delivering. But when he was playing the character in Taken, which did I say his name was Brian Mills? Yeah, Brian Mills. It's so funny because it's such a run of the mill name.
I know. It's like the screenwriter's like, oh, we got to give him a name. Brian Mills.
Exactly. We know there's big lines in that, but I don't have any money, but I'd have a particular set of skills. We know that better than, oh, that's right. The character's named Brian Mills and he was in 3 movies.
Yeah.
But I love the fact that Liam Neeson is basically playing the same type of character here in a way, at least the way he growls his lines and is very serious. And yet one is, a big surprise, but very effective thriller. And this one is a parody of those kind of sort of genres and just as effective.
Yeah, and this movie could have done some dumb self-aware joke where Frank Drebin has kids and they're like, where are they? And he's like, they kept getting taken from me, so the government took them away from me.
Yeah, I mean that would be see a lot of screenwriters joke, to your point.
Yeah,
but they're working a little bit smarter here than the typical fare. So I think that one helps this.
Yeah, and we've gotten, like you said, that we've had a lot of years where the comedies go through different shifts, like what the style's going to be.
Yep.
And the style that comedy landed on, I think since like 2005 for decades, has been The Office. Everyone's like, okay, we got to have the.
And even the Modern Family was a parody of a documentary. They'd always be looking at the camera, which I think is extraordinary that Modern Family ended without us ever showing them watching the documentary or ever seeing the documentarians. In fact, I think they probably sold it a little bit with that trope because it was a big hit on The Office, but I think they should have abandoned it after the first season and never returned to it. It got plenty of laughs without having to do those breaking the fourth wall takes to the camera. And what, there's a cameraman filming them every time they're at night in the bathroom or something? No, I don't think so. And they never acknowledge it when they're together or anywhere else. But yeah, that's right. That sort of pseudo documentary became a big style of comedies in that period.
Yeah, and comedies have become like really
Abbott Elementary does the same thing. They're being filmed at the fourth wall.
Like Parks, Rec, Modern Family, Abbott Elementary, like they all kind of had the same. Even Veep had the same style, although Veep is very much a very different show where it's just about the cutthroat world of politics and how everyone hates each other, and it's probably because HBO they can swear all the time, so it makes it a little more easy and approachable. But yeah, like comedy also throughout the years has been kind of like cynical and angry, and this is like this movie, like it has the cynical, angry, like cops killing minorities jokes, but it also is very lighthearted and very feel good. And it's something that we don't really get much of anymore. And I think it's refreshing to have a comedy that doesn't remind us of how shitty the world is all the time. And that's why it's good to see a movie like The Naked Gun.
I agree with that, Mike. In fact, to your point, shows like Succession and The Sopranos and Dexter, they were very sort of dark, but in many respects, dark comedies. I laughed at Succession more than I did at most comedies that were on if I was watching comedies during that, because it was funny. And even the stuff when characters died or, the big funeral for the patriarch towards the end of the last season was very funny because it's dark humor and we're supposed to laugh at these awful, ridiculous people. That's kind of where comedy has ended up a lot of times in sort of dramedies or dark comedies. I think those have become more of it since Veep, since some of the world has changed and become uglier, that we now gravitate towards stuff that has a more of a bitter taste to it. So you're right. This one is, I think, kind of a nice throwback in the sense that it's not trying too hard to be contemporary to the point where it's like, in order to be contemporary, we have to be edgy and dark and mean. It's already having enough fun with the way movies and heroes and Liam Neeson's career have gone, that there's plenty to make fun of there. And the police procedural has not gone away. There's still, I think, at least every other show that's created in any new season of television. It's ridiculous. And if it's not a cop show, it's some sort of assassin. I mean, my God, Jason Statham, it's like, he was probably like, can I at least be chased by a shark, even if it's a 20, times larger shark than the one in Jaws? Yes, at least you're not playing an assassin, Mike.
Yeah, I know. Jason Statham plays.
He's played so many of the same.
That's not an actor.
But that's what that's why I think this works too, because we're all still very, very familiar with the way procedurals and police main character series or movies work.
Yeah, yeah, and we haven't seen anything with slapstick humor like this that worked so well in a long time, and it's just like a breath of fresh air. It's like, oh man, this is like the comedies I've been seeing. Like, oh, like you have Seinfeld, and then Always Sunny, which is like its even darker successor, and
Right.
then
Yeah.
as like those shows are great. I love that. They're Always Sunny is freaking
Oh,
hilarious.
and What We Do in the Shadows. I mean, those are terrific
Oh
shows.
yeah,
They're darker though, but see, that's the
yeah,
thing is this has a little bit more. It's not really innocent, but it's a little bit lighter fare. Those other
hmm
ones are tinged with, well, and I think really comedy today generally is dark comedy.
yeah,
At
yeah, and I
least
think it's
more of the
reflective
ones that
of
come
time.
out are that realm.
Yeah, yeah, and it's just good to see a light comedy that because like the other light comedies I usually see are like kids films, and they like
Yeah.
actually Bad Guys 2 had some pretty clever jokes in it.
Hmm.
Like one joke kind of I think left the kids traumatized behind me, so I loved it.
Yeah.
But
Well, do you know the great truism of animated shows or films are they have to be made for adults enough because the adults are going to
Mhm.
accompany the kids,
Yeah.
and so they want to amuse them. They're going to watch them. Usually, children do not watch television alone at a certain age,
Mhm.
and so they make stuff that has a appeal to the parents as well. And all the animated movies that have come out, I would argue, since the beginning of time, have probably been fairly close to four quadrant movies, if
Mhm.
not appealing to adults on many levels as well. I mean, I think in some respects the Pixar movies were more for adults than kids.
Oh yeah, especially I think like Toy Story because that movie's like super existential. Like when you see it as a kid, you don't get the whole concept of abandonment and
Mhm.
being wanted and belonged in the world.
Well,
And
and
then
like
you,
the inside out things too. I mean, like how many
oh
kids understand the various emotions that drive a person's psyche and stuff? I
yeah,
mean,
mhm.
that whole thing is very intellectual.
Oh yeah, like
And
with
yet
the
very
whole
popular. So
yeah.
the parents like to see it as much as the kids and went 3 or 4 times too.
Yeah, so it's good to see a dumb comedy like this, and it's been a kind of a crazy 2 weeks for me because 2 of my favorite comedies of all time have gotten sequels. My 3rd favorite comedy of all time got sequels a long time ago. My 3rd favorite comedy is National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, and, yeah, Vegas Vacation wasn't good. But, I yeah, word salad. Anyways,
What was the other
Happy
reason?
Gilmore 2
What happened?
was that's an example of how not to do a legacy sequel. Don't
Mhm.
just rely on old jokes and cameos, and also keep your movie short. Comedy is hard to laugh for over an hour. Like for me physically, after over an
Yeah.
hour, I'm just like, okay.
Yeah, I
You
agree.
know,
Even this one was short, but it could have been 10 minutes shorter, I thought.
Oh, no, I was happy with I thought the length was perfect,
Yeah,
but
but I mean,
I thought the length in Happy Gilmore 2, that was 40
but
minutes
yeah,
longer than the
anybody
original.
that goes past 90 minutes is asking for trouble.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, that was the problem with Happy Gilmore 2 is 40 minutes longer than the first one. You don't need to do that.
Oh, that's sad.
Yeah, and the way they brought back some characters is just like weird,
Mm.
but like some were like creative choices, like what they do with Shooter McGavin. I'm like, okay, that's kind of interesting, but it doesn't really go anywhere. Like at least with this film, it has a premise, it delivers on a plot. Because the bad guy, he's basically like Thanos. He wants to recorrect the world, into like his image. But of course, he's also like an evil billionaire bad guy,
Right,
blah blah
right,
blah blah.
right.
But like the whole thing is like Danny Houston's playing it straight as hell, and of course when they have their fight scene, he punches him in the gut, and he's like,
Yeah.
"Oh yeah, the gut." Oh. Like yeah, that part wasn't as funny as the other gags, but it's still pretty good.
But it was still funny because we
Yeah,
see people get hit so much and they never
yeah,
have any physical reaction to it. You get
hmm
punched in the stomach once, you're going to vomit. You're
yep,
going to be sick for a couple hours. You're not going to feel good. And these people get punched in the jaw and keep fighting. And then the next scene, they're perfectly capable. And maybe, oh, I've got a little bruise here. I'm patting it down with a wet towel or something. It's like, what? So
yeah,
even that as a subtler joke worked pretty well because they're spoofing the stupidity of how fight scenes are done in films. But yeah, this one was fun. This one was fun to
yeah,
see, and I think very well done and tricky to do in this day and age with so much comedy already been done before. How do you make this one work? And they managed to. But I think it's a lot of it is the very casting and having these people play it really really straight.
yeah, absolutely. So I'm gonna give our final ratings for this one, and I think we'll wrap it up.
Okay.
So out of how many Guinnesses would you give the Naked
I
Gun
would give this
2025?
one. I would give this one 3. I liked it a lot.
Okay.
I mean, I don't think it's ready for classic status, but I think as
Yeah.
a modern comedy, it was a very pleasant 3 stars for me.
Yeah. For me, it's 3.5.
Okay.
I thought this is one of the funniest comedies I've seen in a while, not just because I'm a fan of the Naked Gun films, but also because I haven't seen a comedy that's genuinely made me laugh this many times this consecutively since like Borat, maybe.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's
good
quite a
point.
feet. It's quite a feat. It doesn't just rely on real cuts. That was the real like comedies that made me laugh. Like I will admit I love the Jackass films. Although now I am at that age, like I had this weird existential moment when I was seeing Jackass Forever. Like the critic next to me was cracking up, and I'm just watching this like, uh, like
Not as
I'm
funny
getting
as you
older.
remember. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I get
but,
that.
uh,
I get that.
but this one, clever, funny, kind spirited, and yeah, it's. I hope we get more Naked Guns after this. I hope that we get more spoofs that are clever like this,
Mhm.
and I think that this is a great starting point. So we talked a while. Jeff, what would you like to plug before we take off?
Well, you can read my reviews at theestablishingshot.org. You can also follow me on Twitter, where I'm Jeff York Writer, or Jeff York Chicago on TikTok and Instagram. My 1-minute movie reviews on TikTok are accompanied by caricatures that I do. I do them on the side. And I also have a caricature website, jeffyorkcaricatures.com. So, and if you ever want to hire me to draw your favorite pet or person or celebrity, just give me a holler. That's something I do on the side, as well as film criticism. So this is a lot of fun talking to you, Mike, and thanks for letting me show.
Oh, of course. I can't wait to see your drawing of Liam Neeson.
Well, we'll see. I'm a little late to it. I've done your show now. I may go on. We'll see what this weekend holds.
Okay, yeah, no pressure, no pressure. But anyways, you can check out all my stuff if you're on social media. If you're on Twitter, go on YPA Reviews. If you're on TikTok, YPA Reviews Chicago, because apparently there was another YPA Reviews. How dare they?
no.
I'm gonna sue them. No, and of course you could go to ypareviews.com for my written reviews, for my YouTube stuff. Of course, you go on TikTok and on YouTube at YPA Reviews. You can see all the videos, and if you listen on, you can see like my quick reactions to like movies, like my like what I thought about them, and of course episodes of this show plus clips from there. And of course you can go to I said ypareviews.com. Screw it. All right, I'm done. Thanks, guys. All right, see you guys, and yeah, don't get arrested. But yeah, bye. Oh wait, wrong button. I almost hit end. All right, now we're ending it. You see, now I'm being embarrassed for comedy. All right, guys.